Good afternoon and welcome to Autism Network Scotland's vlog series in conversation with Neil. This afternoon we're having a conversation with Samantha Grierson about her plays she's been writing and about her life living with autism and how she copes, etc. So, good afternoon, Samantha.
Hey Neil, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's no problem. Could we just start? Could you tell us a wee bit about yourself and what it is you do at the moment?
Hi, so I'm Sam and I'm a playwright and also a director. I am just at the moment casting for my third play, which is the third in a trilogy of plays about later life diagnosis of autism, particularly in females. So I've written these plays myself and direct them and produce them, and they're on kind of popular platforms like Spotify and Amazon and Google, etc. And I'm just trying to really raise awareness that actually, autism isn't just little boys with headphones on, which is a bit of a stereotype that was kind of been produced sort of over the last 10 years, and that autism is 1 in 100. I think it's about that is the statistic. Not that diagnosis is that straightforward, but I think it's about 1 in 100. And we are out there living our lives, and I wanted to make some plays and put some visibility of women living chaotic, crazy lives as we always do, and being autistic and what challenges that adds.
That's excellent. So could I just ask, when was it you got diagnosed?
3 years ago now. Yeah, 3 years since I've officially known that I was autistic.
So would you sort of say you would agree with the idea that floats out that a lot of women go undiagnosed because, to use the analogy, the swan, they look very graceful on the top underneath their paddling, but because they look graceful, they get missed in the sort of sweep of educational psychology services and things at school?
I think that is absolutely fair. I think women have to work harder to survive in the workplace generally and often at school. I've always worked in very male jobs because outside of my writing, I'm actually a strategy and change director, and I've had to work alongside men and kind of work as hard, to kind of get up the career ladder. And you have to adapt, you have to conform, and you have to perform in a certain way to get promoted and to get on in life. And I think being autistic as well, especially when you don't realize you are kind of working with these extra traits that you've got to kind of get under control to conform. And I think women have to do this just generally more to kind of survive in certainly what was a man's world up to 20 years ago. I think that's less of the case now, but equality is not there completely.
So would you say that the glass ceiling still maybe exists a bit too much?
I mean, absolutely, definitely does. You just have to look at the gender pay gap and kind of boardroom positions that are taken up by women versus men, and we're absolutely not there yet. We're making strides towards that. So I think that is, so as a woman, you kind of fight in gender inequality as well as being neurodivergent. So I think that's a kind of a double kind of fight that you've got on your plate. And I think in some ways that toughens you. It certainly did me, because I wasn't going to be overlooked because I am different, and that's certainly given me kind of the impetus to carry on and perform harder.
That's excellent. I was going to ask, obviously you'd mentioned there that you weren't diagnosed till long after you'd left school. Did you find, looking back on it, whether that there was sort of any sort of strategies that you used to help cope with school that we could maybe share with other autistics?
I think I got away with school by keeping my head down, and I was very bookish and quiet and would get obsessed in a subject, and very kind of taken away by it. And I'd just read entire libraries of books, so there was nothing left to read anymore. And I think my my self-absorption was quite protective of me in a way, because I could take myself away with books. And I didn't have a lot of friends. I certainly wasn't popular by any standards. I had a couple of people that I would hang out with and I felt safe around. And I think it was really just a strategy of keeping my head down and sometimes just getting to the end of the school day, try not to get bullied or even singled out by the teachers. So it was literally just a survival, head down, don't make any sudden moves kind of strategy until I could get to university and be myself more.
And I suppose I'd also ask, related to that, do you feel that your diagnosis, even though it came later, kind of makes younger life make a bit more sense?
It does. I always say, it's like a plot twist at the end, and you look back and then on the whole play or the whole film, and you think, "Gosh, if we'd known that at the beginning." And I think when I first got my diagnosis, I was angry. I was actually angry. I wasn't angry because I'm autistic. I was angry because I didn't know I was autistic. And if I think about struggles that I'd had at work, in social settings particularly, and in the physical working environment in terms of noise, distractions, that kind of thing, I think if I could have asked for reasonable adjustments 20 years ago, I think I'd been an even higher performer than I was, and I would have certainly not worried as much as I did about the social aspects, because I could have said, I'm going to struggle with these things, and I wouldn't have worried about my career being kind of tarnished by the fact that I didn't attend social events.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly was the case for me when the second I did university twice. The first was an unmitigated disaster. The second worked out a lot better because by then I'd got my autism diagnosis. And when I go into the disability service, I got a lot of support put in place. I had an autistic mentor that showed me around the campus early. I had a named contact in the department who was the same person throughout my 4 years at university that I could go to with any problems.
Brilliant.
I got allowances made for spelling, grammar, etc. in my essay writing, and then in my exams I got extra time. I got extra time. I got extra reading time, and then I got it wasn't a scribe, but it was equivalent of a scribe. I did my exams on laptop with Dragon, which is voice recognition software, which made such a difference to the ability to perform. And to me, it actually meant that instead of sort of coming out just with a degree, I came out with a master's degree. So I think that certainly helped. Was that something you had access to, or was it kind of because you were undiagnosed, they couldn't offer you any support like that?
I didn't have access to anything, and I was massively chaotic at university. In fact, I was doing everything apart from what I should be doing, because I have got ADHD as well. So what I did famously, and I've written this into Crocodile, my first play, that Crocodile does this, is that my first week university, I went to the library, took the last 5 years of exam papers that were, in the archive bit of the library, laid them all out on the floor. I mean, literally put the books all over the floor, looked at the recurring exam questions, worked out which the key questions were that would, pop up every single year, looked at my lecture timetable, attended 4 hours a week and got a 2-1 by just a strategy of how can I get through this as quick as possible without the pain. So I did, that's how I got through my studying. I just like to be completely efficient and just use the only energy I need to use. And that was how I got through, because I can't sit through hours and hours and hours of lectures and lots of people and lots of noise. I can't do it. So I had to work out, how can I be successful and laser focus, achieve that. And then I was in the climbing club, which really helped me. Played volleyball. I was swimming. I just did loads and loads of other activities, which helped me then when I could focus and just got my university done in the most efficient way possible, because that's how I kind of try to live my life.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite similar. During my first year, my first set of exams, I'd done what I'd done in college, which I'd done an access course through college, the sort of 10 months just before I went to university. And I'd done a sort of cram, learn everything they told me in lectures.
Yeah.
And of course, I got my exam. I knew the minute I walked out the exam hall, I was like, right, that's it. That's stuffed. Fortunately, it was a course that was coursework heavy as well. So a lot of it was continuous assessment. About 80% of your overall mark came from your 2 essays, with 20 coming from the exam, which saved me. And I still got a good pass, but the exam mark was horrific. And it made me very quickly realize that lectures are there to get your mind thinking. Where you actually learn in university is the reading. And if you were just to stay home and never go to a lecture, just do all the required and recommended reading and make good notes off that, you'd get a 2-1 or a first at university. That's where you learn. And that certainly made it interesting to me to see that and be able then to say, well, actually, I can, like you, I need to have an outlet for my stress. Fortunately, I had a very good friend who was the same year as me, who was doing a law degree. And he was avoiding going to class because he didn't understand it. So that gave you an outlet. And then societies as well.
Yeah.
Edinburgh's got quite a good student association. So we had the Bedlam Theatre, and I was a big theatre buff at the time.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
I spent a lot of my time. I'm not an actor. I like to stay backstage unseen,
Okay.
dressed all in black. And you just see the beautiful effects I create on stage.
Amazing.
And that's enough for me. So that gave me my outlet as well to cope with the stresses of university.
Yeah.
So moving on then, we have discussed briefly, I just wanted to pick up on one thing. You said the sort of plot twist with autism. Would you say that's, without spoilering it for anyone who's not seen it, the immense plot twist at the end of Mole? Was that one of the sort of ideas that came, root of the idea for the plot twist in Mole?
I think when I wanted to explore with Mole, motherhood is a big theme that comes up in all my plays because there's lots of different ways of being a mother. And I really wanted to explore motherhood. I really wanted to explore loneliness as well, and loss, and because I didn't want to just write an autistic play about being autistic, because I don't think that's interesting. I think I wanted to talk about some bigger life themes, and then that they just happen to an autistic person. So I think what I wanted really to do with Mole is get her to talk for the first time to somebody about, what living as an autistic person is like in her 50s, with a little dog, and that's all she's got. And she's completely misunderstood. And, she was unable to have children. And her boyfriend leaves her because of this. And, she spent the rest of her life on her own. And until she meets Sylvia, who's a woman in her 70s, who loses her little boy when he's 5. And she realizes through talking to Mole and talking about autistic traits that he must have been autistic too. And that actually Mole helps Sylvia deal with her grief and actually imagines what the little boy, John David, would have looked like when he was older as a big, strapping autistic man that would have been a doctor or, painter and decorator, whatever he would have been. But Mole's actually honesty about being autistic and the experiences and loneliness, etc., that she'd been through, actually tap into Sylvia's shared loneliness and allow her to express her grief that she's been holding onto for a very long time. So I guess I try to use emotional stories really to explore what that looks like for an autistic person.
So could I then ask, just with both Mole and Crocodile, to me they were very, very different, in the way they approached. How much of it was based on you and your life experience? Because obviously with Crocodile, you're kind of flashing back to the girl at 8 years old.
Yeah.
I never quite understood if she'd had, I think her mother was, the idea was she didn't have a very happy home life.
Yeah.
And was that based on you, or was that drawing on your experiences, or was it just a sort of total makeup as to give some backstory to why she was the way she was.
So Crocodile is based on a woman in her 30s who has an autism and ADHD diagnosis, and indeed I did. And I was really angry when I wrote Crocodile because I was angry about getting this later life diagnosis and angry that I hadn't known earlier. And so all that anger I channeled into this story of a woman who's got this absolutely car crash life. It's visceral. It's fast. It's written. I like to say it's written in ADHD time. I wrote the whole play in 2.5 days. I just sat down and wrote it. You can feel that frenetic ADHD energy coming out of me in it, and the way she talks, the way she acts. I kind of try to get that across. And my mom and dad, were not like that. My mom and dad are supportive, but what I wanted to do was kind of create this this melting pot for poor Crocodile to grow up through. And what does that look like for that autistic ADHD person under so much pressure? And explore meltdowns, because they're not talked about enough. People like to talk about autistic superpowers and all the really positive things about autism, because of course that all exists, but you know what, we melt down, we overload, we don't cope. There are sides that are difficult to talk about and difficult to explain, and I'm not afraid to deal with them. I wanted to get that across in Crocodile. So Crocodile is very, very similar to me, as I say, not the mother, thankfully, but that kind of anger and that frustration is in there. By the time you get to Mole, the second play, it's a lady in her 50s who's processed a lot of that. She's kind of calmer with herself. On my third play, Kitty, which I'm casting for at the moment, which is set in Scotland, it's about a Kitty who's about to turn 90 and does turn 90 during the course of the play, and she's not diagnosed with anything, but you can clearly see that she's got a lot of traits during the play. And her two granddaughters take her on a road trip across Scotland. So they basically drive through Glasgow up to Crevy on the north coast in Aberdeenshire in this clapped out camper van, which is a bit of a crazy journey. And her one of her granddaughters is autistic ADHD as well. And what the story there is with Ray is she actually froze some of her eggs in an IVF situation prior to getting a diagnosis of autism, because she didn't want her eggs to hear. She didn't want her eggs to know if she was autistic or not. So she got the eggs frozen, went through the process, got her autism ADHD process, and then was deciding whether to have children. And she's got a really big dilemma about, shall I have kids? Because there is potentially a genetic component with ADHD and autism. And the dilemma of, should I pass that on to my children, knowing how hard life was for me being autistic? So she goes on that whole journey, and I know that's controversial, but she goes on that journey on this camper van trip while trying to persuade her grandma, Kitty, to get herself a diagnosis. And then she has another sister with her as well that's having a midlife crisis, and she's neurotypical. So you've got that juxtaposition of a neurotypical person who ends up having a panic attack versus an autistic person, and you put them all in a camper van on the search for mistletoe and send them across Scotland. It's bonkers. So I'm just trying to get across, different themes and I don't know, interesting things to think about from an autistic.
I mean, it does. To me, what I loved about it is it's thought-provoking, and it makes you think, and it makes you want to have both of them made you want to have a conversation. I spent, after I'd listened to it, and my mum listened to it as well, we spent the next 2.5 hours discussing it in great detail. Now, we were a bit strange. She is an English teacher, so that does make sense. But, that idea that it is a bit controversial, and sometimes dealing with quite concerning situations, as you described there, a neurotypical who's having a midlife crisis and an autistic individual who's concerned about her identity and the genetic traits of autism and whether she'll pass them on. But dealing with it in a light-hearted way with this chaotic lifestyle going on and this madcap trip across Scotland in a camper van that's probably going to die at any moment. It's dark. It's funny, but it's dark. You kind of laugh at it, but you think, I shouldn't be laughing at it. It's not that funny, but boy, is it funny, if that makes sense. And that's what I loved about both of the works I listened to. I was going to ask as well, why a Welsh village?
I had this character, so
for
probably
Mo.
too much information here, but I was in the bath and it just occurred to me. I just had this idea of this woman who's in her 50s and she's autistic and she's a face painter. And I say that with care, face painter. So she was a face painter. And the idea that there's this woman in her 50s made up with this really bad face paint on because she's not good at face painting. And then I heard, like, I had this Welsh voice in my head and I just thought, this works for me, and I wanted to do, and I'm really kind of big on like diversity and exploring different regions. I mean, I'm from Yorkshire, so Crocodile does Yorkshire and London, and I wanted to kind of consider Wales, and then Scotland being, I live in Scotland, I mean, being my final play. But I think being in Wales actually adds something, and I chose Judith Owen, who's done the music for the theme tune, very kindly let me have the theme tune for Mole. She's Welsh, and so I wanted everything to be Welsh. I got obviously really, really well known and fantastic Welsh actors to play the parts because I wanted the richness of their voices and the culture. And this idea of this small village, that Mole's never left this tiny village in Wales. It felt very specific and particular to Wales. And then they obviously end, going on an adventure, which I won't spoil at the end. It's important to me that everything isn't set in London. I don't, being from Halifax in Yorkshire, there, the UK is bigger than that, and I've absolutely wanted to show diversity and regionalism and different accents and different ages, and I've just wanted diversity in all my writing.
So, sort of one of the final questions I had then was, with both Mole and Crocodile, the sort of best friend seems very understanding of autism and keen to know more. I say the best friend, but Sylvia in Mole, and I can't remember her best friend's name in Crocodile.
Bo in Crocodile, yeah.
Both seem to really want to understand and be very supportive. Now, certainly my experience of meeting neurotypicals, they're few and far between the ones that want to actually be supportive and learn, whereas a lot more of them are they think they know all because you ask them about autism and say, oh yeah, I know about that, I've seen the Rain Man. And you're like, go away,
Yeah, I'm not a maths genius. I'm not even very good at maths.
I mean, there are some, there are plenty of people who have autism who are maths geniuses, and a lot of them do work in financial sectors because they're maths geniuses, but not everyone is. And to be categorized like that, nobody wants to be categorized.
No, they don't. And I mean, sorry, it was a doorbell when I apologize. I think about back to the friend thing, my best friend I've been friends with her since I was 4, and she has stood by me whatever I've thrown at her. I mean, I am gay, autistic, ADHD, chaotic, change jobs all the time, get up to all kinds of antics, and she doesn't bat an eyelid. And I've needed that strength and that stability behind me to just go, okay, but are you happy? And I've she's been an absolute backbone for me. She really has. And I wish everybody a Sylvia or a Bo to kind of be that backstop. But I appreciate that not everybody has got that understanding friend in the background.
And so that was another character that was kind of drawn from your own experience.
I mean, Bo is very much. Hope she's not going to sue me, but very much based on my best friend, because she's just been absolutely fantastic. And the thing is about her as well, she will take the mickey out of me, and she stops me taking myself so seriously. Because one thing I've learned is, if you can't have a sense of humor about what you're doing, then everything else becomes a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly my experience. I'm exactly the same. And I had a best friend who, because he was very critical of me taking my Ritalin and things when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, and said I didn't need medication. But I think that was more due to his ignorance, because actually as time went on, and he went to college the year before me, to the same college as I did, and he met a girl who had an autistic brother, and she was doing a big report on autism for their final sort of sociology report. And that really changed his attitude, and he started looking into it. And his now wife works in the autism field as well, and he
Okay.
works as a support worker
Wow.
for Action for Children with kids with a variety of complex needs. And I do think, that sort of transition for him made him a lot more understanding, but he still likes to, take the piss out of me constantly.
But I do think it helps.
But
So
it's done
I do
in a
think it
friendly
helps.
way, and it's done in
Exactly.
I can now do it. Other friends try and copy him, and it doesn't work because I'm like, just don't try it, because he knows me so well. We've known
Yeah.
each other for 25 years now, and he
Yes.
knows me so well. He knows my humor, and he knows how to make it humorous. Whereas
Yes.
you trying to do it, it'll just sound really offensive,
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Yeah,
not great.
definitely.
So I suppose the last thing I really wanted to have a brief chat about was, have you ever thought about putting any of the plays together, or even separately standing them and seeing them on the stage? Would you like
Well,
to see them?
exactly the original intention when I wrote Crocodile was just before lockdown. So I was fully intended. I was starting to feel out, I had theatre directors interested in it, etc. And I was keen to put it on at Edinburgh Fringe. But we all know what happened for the last year. And I thought, well, I'm damned if this bloody virus is going to stop me from doing it. So what can I do? I can do audio plays. So I've got some big names that have worked with me on these plays, and it's just it's just testament to their belief in what I'm trying to promote, that they've kind of believed in me as well. So I've written a film as well. It's sort of in 10 parts, called Cathcartic, and it's actually set at all the different train stations on the Cathcart line in Glasgow. And basically at each train stop there is an interaction with this character, the main character, called Station, and he meets these various people, and you see an insight into their life, and then it all ties together by the end of the train line, and you wonder what on earth's happened. I'm not going to spoil any more about that, but that's going to be a film that we're going to be filming soon as lockdown's up. So audio plays were a symptom of being locked up, but as I say, I'm working on a film, and I do want to do more things on the screen. I think you can get a wider audience and a wider reach, and I do want later life diagnosis of women, particularly with autism, to be on screens in front of people, and hopefully people can see these characters come to life. I've had so many autistic people contact me and say, thank you for putting me out there. I can finally hear myself as a character. I've never been on the TV before. I've never looked at anyone and gone, she's like me. And thank you for putting an autistic woman out there. And that's what it's been about for me. On Twitter, just getting inundated with feedback from autistic, particularly women, just to say thank you. It's been worth it all. It's been absolutely worth it all.
Excellent. I mean, I certainly would say as well, I think it needs to carry on, and long may it continue. There's been too much focus, right back, even back to the 40s and 50s, when it was Hans Asperger, and it was boys he was working on, and you're kind of like, well, why is it only boys?
Yeah. And
You
they
know?
grow up.
And they grow up,
as well.
and
Yeah.
and I'd certainly feel, I suppose I'd sort of ask as well, what more do you think we can be doing to kind of, it's a strange one, because you want to say narrow the inequality gap, but it's not one that you necessarily want narrowed. Enough government would focus on narrowing the inequality gap, because you don't want more people diagnosed with autism. You just want those who are autistic to have an easier access to diagnosis and support, I suppose.
I think diagnosis and support is important, but I also think I've been challenged about this recently, because I've been doing a lot of work to see how we can promote autism employment in the workplace. And I had somebody say to me a few weeks ago, oh, how can any company write a job advert that's, good for autistic people and then good for everyone else? I said, you've got this wrong. If you write a job advert that's great for autistic people, it's great for everybody, because it's a communication situation. So if you can write great communication that works for autistic people, guess what? You've just written fantastic communication, full stop. This is not about making it special for autistic people in that sense. It's about making it very clear, very concise, and it makes sense. And if we could all write like that, if we could all communicate better, if we could have workplaces that people weren't bombarded with sounds, etc. Because whether you're neurotypical or autistic, if you're in a workplace with strip lights and lots of ambient noise, trust me, your productivity is suffering. And it's not just the autistic people who are going to say that to you with sensory requirements. And I genuinely think if we clean up a lot of these disruptive stimulations that are in workplaces, it will benefit everybody, not just the autistic population.
I think as well, I mean, I think there's a huge, certainly this lockdown to me would suggest that there's a huge amount of employment that doesn't need to be done in an office.
Yes.
You know, everyone's working from home. The
Yes.
technologies we have now with Zoom, with Microsoft Teams, and with high-speed internet means that it's so much easier. I would almost say to an employer, would you not be better, instead of spending millions opening an office, spend half of that providing every employee with a laptop and a mobile phone?
Yeah, definitely.
And, if they needed money towards an internet connection, but internet these days is so cheap, you don't have to be paying through the nose anymore for good quality connection, and run it that way. And yes, every so often you need to have everybody into the office, because not seeing your colleagues every day can get a bit kind of
it can, yeah,
depressing. I'm sure everybody's the same. There's been days where you've done a Zoom meeting wearing a shirt, but on the bottom half of your pajama trousers and a pair of flip-flops, which you'd never ever dream of doing in an office, because people only see you from the neck up. And it's, it's part of that idea of having a routine going to work. But I do think we need to investigate further where we can make allowances and how we can draw in more autistic people to the workplace who, as you've rightly said, may struggle with sensory things, or even the transport getting to and from work can be too much for.
I agree. Yeah.
Excuse me, and how we address those sort of problems.
Definitely.
So, but it's been very, very interesting to chat to you this afternoon.
Brilliant. Neil, you're absolute superstar. Thanks so much for doing this.
Well, thanks again, and I'll let you know as soon as it's out. Cool, thanks very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Bye just
Cheers.
now.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for taking the time to watch our vlog today. Please feel free to follow Samantha Griers on her Twitter account at Samantha Griers3. Check out her website at www.socroc.co.uk, or also listen to one of her fantastic plays at https://anchor.fm/Samantha-Grierson-Schwartz. If you wish to contact Samantha, please feel free to do so on the mobile number listed on screen. Thanks again. Goodbye.